She stood in line at the pawn shop, laughing with her friend. My daughter, the same girl who once wore her father's ring on her tiny finger during his funeral. Minutes later, my phone rang. The jeweler's voice was trembling. "Ma'am, this ring, it isn't just gold. There's something inside it." My heart dropped. I drove there without even wearing my shoes. When he opened it under the light, her laughter died. Before I tell you what happened next, please like this video, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Because what was hidden inside that ring wasn't meant to be found by anyone, especially her. You know, they say time heals all wounds, but they never tell you how some wounds become part of your breathing. 37 years. 37 years I shared my life with a man who taught me that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every single morning when you open your eyes. David wasn't perfect. God knows he wasn't perfect. He left dirty dishes in the sink, forgot to put the toilet seat down, and had this infuriating habit of humming the same 3 bars of some forgotten song while he shaved. But he was mine. And I was his. Completely, utterly, devotedly his. The morning he died, the world didn't stop. The sun still rose. Birds still sang. Coffee still brewed. But something inside me, something fundamental, just went quiet. Like someone had turned down the volume on my soul. The funeral was a blur of black dresses and hollow condolences. Everyone kept telling me how sorry they were for my loss, as if David was something I had misplaced, like car keys or reading glasses. But you don't lose the love of your life. You don't lose 37 years of shared mornings and whispered secrets and hands held through every storm. That kind of love doesn't get lost. It gets ripped away, leaving you gasping for air in a world that suddenly feels too big and too empty and too damn quiet. After everyone left, after the last casserole dish was returned and the final sympathy card was read, I found myself alone in our house, my house now, I suppose, staring at the ring David had worn every single day since our wedding. It wasn't much to look at, really. Simple gold band, worn smooth by decades of his carpenter's hands. No diamonds, no engravings, nothing fancy. Just gold and love and time. But when I held it up to the light that first evening, it caught the sunset streaming through our kitchen window, and for just a moment, I could swear I felt him there. Standing behind me, his hand on my shoulder, his voice whispering in my ear, "Keep it safe, darling. Keep us safe." So I did. I bought a small glass box, nothing elaborate, just something clear and simple that would hold the ring and let the light touch it every morning. I placed it on the kitchen counter, right next to his photograph. The one from our 20th anniversary, where he's laughing at something I said just before the camera clicked. His eyes are crinkled at the corners, the way they always got when joy took him by surprise. And every morning, while I watered my plants or folded his shirts, yes, I still kept his shirts, still washed them, still folded them with the same care I'd shown for 37 years, I would talk to him. "Good morning, my love. The roses are blooming again. You'd be proud of them. Remember how you said they'd never taken this soil? Well, you were wrong about that, just like you were wrong about Mrs. Henderson's cat. He did come home, just like I said he would." I would pause, waiting for an answer that would never come, then continue. "Sarah called yesterday. She's thinking about coming for dinner on Sunday. I told her I'd make your pot roast. She always loved your pot roast." It wasn't madness. People might have thought it was madness, talking to a photograph every morning like he could hear me, like he might suddenly smile a little wider or nod his approval. But it wasn't madness. It was love that refused to fade. Love that had nowhere else to go except into the empty air of our kitchen, bouncing off the walls we'd painted together, settling into the silence like dust on unused furniture. Sarah did come for dinner that first Sunday, and the Sunday after that. And for a while, I thought maybe we were finding our way back to each other. She'd lost her father, after all. I'd lost my husband. We were both grieving, both trying to figure out how to be a family of 2 instead of 3. But as the weeks turned into months, I started to notice things. The way she'd check her phone constantly during our conversations. The way her eyes would wander around the house, cataloging things, assessing things, like she was taking inventory of what remained of David's life. The way she'd pick up his tools from the garage, his books from the shelf, handling them with a casual indifference that made my chest tight. "Mom, you really should think about downsizing," she said one evening, gesturing around our living room with her wine glass. "This house is way too big for just you. And all this stuff. Dad stuff. You can't hold on to everything forever." I didn't answer right away. I was looking at the glass box on the counter, watching how the evening light caught the gold band inside. "I'm not holding on to everything," I said finally. "I'm holding on to what matters." "But what matters to you might not matter to anyone else," she said, and there was something in her voice, something sharp and impatient, that made me really look at her. When had my daughter become this stranger who spoke about her father's life like it was clutter to be cleared away? I thought she just missed her father in her own way. I told David's photograph the next morning, my voice thick with tears I hadn't expected. I didn't realize she was missing the wealth he left behind. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? Sarah wasn't mourning David. She was mourning the inheritance she thought should have been larger, the estate she'd imagined would set her up for life. David had been a good man, a hard-working man, but we weren't wealthy. We had our house, our modest savings, his tools, and the love we'd built over 37 years. But love doesn't have a cash value. Love doesn't pay off credit cards or impress new boyfriends or buy the kind of life Sarah thought she deserved. The visits became less frequent after that. Phone calls became shorter. And when she did come by, there was always something, some small item of David's that caught her eye, some suggestion about selling this or donating that. She never asked about the ring directly, but I caught her looking at it. Staring at the glass box when she thought I wasn't watching. Calculating. Planning. Waiting. I should have seen it coming. God help me, I should have protected that ring the way David would have protected it. But you don't expect your own daughter, your own flesh and blood, to steal from you. You don't imagine that the little girl who used to wear her father's ring on her tiny finger during his funeral would grow into a woman who saw that same ring as nothing more than a commodity to be sold. It was a Tuesday morning when I found the box empty. I remember because Tuesdays were always the day I changed the water in David's flowers, fresh daisies from the garden he'd planted for me 20 years ago. I was reaching for the glass box to move it aside when I noticed the sunlight hitting empty space. Cold, hollow, wrong. The ring was gone. The box was there, the photograph was there, but the one thing that connected me to David, the one physical piece of our love story that I had left, was gone. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, hoping it was a dream, hoping I'd wake up in our bed with David's arm around my waist and his gentle snoring in my ear. But even dreams don't feel that sharp. Even dreams don't cut that deep. I searched everywhere. Drawers I hadn't opened in months. Shelves I could barely reach. Old jewelry boxes and forgotten coat pockets. Nothing. Nothing but the growing certainty that I knew exactly where that ring had gone, exactly who had taken it, and exactly why. When I called Sarah, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial her number. "Hi, Mom," she answered, and I could hear traffic in the background, voices, the sound of life moving forward while mine stood still. "Sarah," I said, and my voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from someone else's throat. "Sarah, when you were here yesterday, did you notice anything different about the kitchen?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. "Mom, what do you mean?" I didn't really pay attention to the kitchen. "Why?" "The ring," I said. "David's ring. It's missing." Another pause. Another laugh, but this one was sharper, more impatient. "Mom, it's just a ring. You have too many memories attached to things. Maybe you moved it somewhere and forgot. You know how you get sometimes. How I get sometimes." As if grief was senility. As if love was confusion. I didn't move it anywhere, I said, but my voice was getting smaller, weaker. Because what was I supposed to say? What was I supposed to do? Accuse my own daughter of theft? Demand that she empty her purse, her pockets, her car? I'm sure it'll turn up, she said, and I could hear her attention already shifting away from me, away from the conversation, away from the pain in my voice. Things always turn up when you stop looking for them. I have to go, Mom. I'm meeting someone for lunch. I ended the call before my tears could sound like weakness. Because that's what I'd become, wasn't I? Weak. Forgotten. A grieving widow whose own daughter saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to what she wanted. The house felt different after that phone call. Emptier. Colder. Like something essential had been removed, and now the walls themselves were mourning. I wandered from room to room, touching things David had touched, sitting in chairs where he'd sat, trying to feel some echo of his presence. But the ring had been my anchor to him, and without it, I felt myself drifting away from everything that had once felt solid and real. That night, I ate dinner alone in our dining room, my dining room now, staring at his empty chair across the table. The silence was so complete it hurt. Even the house seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something that would never come. He used to say, "Love her even when she forgets where she came from." I whispered to the photograph later, my voice barely audible in the darkness. But he never told me what to do when she sells what he left behind. The days that followed were the longest of my life. Longer than the nights after David's diagnosis. Longer than the weeks of watching him fade away in that hospital bed. Longer than the first morning I woke up alone. Because this wasn't just grief anymore. This was betrayal. This was the slow, crushing realization that the daughter I'd raised, the little girl I'd loved and protected and sacrificed for, had become someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could steal from her own mother and laugh about it. Someone who could take the last piece of her father and turn it into cash without a second thought. I stopped answering the phone. Stopped checking my mail. Stopped watering the plants David had loved so much. What was the point? What was the point of maintaining anything when the people you loved could just take it away whenever they felt like it? My sister called. My neighbors knocked. Sarah left voicemails that started concerned and gradually became irritated, then accusatory. "Mom, you're scaring people. Mrs. Chin says she hasn't seen you in days. Are you taking your medications? Are you eating? You need to call me back. You need to stop this dramatic behavior." Dramatic behavior. As if mourning the theft of my husband's ring was some kind of performance. As if the pain of losing the last physical connection to the love of my life was something I was doing for attention. I locked myself away in our bedroom, my bedroom, surrounded by David's clothes, his books, his reading glasses still sitting on the nightstand where he'd left them that last morning. I held his pillow against my chest and breathed in the faint scent of his aftershave that still lingered in the fabric. And I talked to him. I talked to him like he was right there beside me, like any moment he might reach over and take my hand and tell me everything would be all right. "I don't know what to do," I whispered into the darkness. "I don't know how to forgive her for this. I don't know how to love someone who could hurt me this way. Help me, David. Please. Help me understand how to keep going when everything we built together is being sold off piece by piece." But the silence just stretched on, filled with nothing but my own breathing and the ticking of the clock David had given me for our 10th anniversary. Even that sound seemed different now. Emptier. Like time itself was mourning. The phone rang on a Friday morning, 5 days after I'd discovered the theft. I almost didn't answer it. I'd been ignoring calls all week, letting the machine pick up while I listened to concerned voices leaving increasingly frustrated messages. But something about this ring was different. Urgent. Insistent. "Hello." My voice was hoarse from disuse, scratchy and weak. "Ma'am," said a voice I didn't recognize. Male, older, with the careful, respectful tone of someone who dealt with precious things for a living. "Ma'am, is this Mrs. Davidson? Mrs. Elizabeth Davidson?" "Yes," I said, sitting up straighter in bed, suddenly alert. Yes, this is Elizabeth Davidson. Who is this? This is Robert Chen from Chen's Fine Jewelry downtown. Ma'am, did you lose a ring recently? A gold wedding band. My heart stopped. Actually stopped for a moment before launching into a rhythm so fast and hard I thought it might burst right out of my chest. Yes, I whispered. Yes, how did you? Ma'am, he said, and his voice was trembling now, shaking with some emotion I couldn't identify. Ma'am, please come to the shop. Right away. It's urgent. There's something you need to see. What do you mean? I asked, but he'd already hung up. Sometimes, when the universe sees injustice, it whispers your name through strangers. Sometimes, when love is being tested, help comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes, when you think God has forgotten about you entirely, He sends an old jeweler with trembling hands to remind you that truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep it's been buried. I didn't even think. I grabbed my keys, shoved my feet into the first shoes I could find, and ran to my car. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. The drive downtown felt like it took forever and no time at all. Every red light was an eternity. Every turn brought me closer to answers I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. Chen's Fine Jewelry was in the old part of town, sandwiched between a used bookstore and a small cafe. I'd never been there before, but David and I had walked past it countless times during our weekend strolls through the historic district. The windows were filled with engagement rings and necklaces, watches and bracelets, all gleaming under the warm display lights. But today, I barely noticed any of it. As I pulled up to the curb, I saw them through the front window. Sarah and her friend Jessica, standing at the counter, laughing about something. My daughter, my own daughter, selling her father's ring like it was nothing more than scrap metal. The sight of her there, casual and carefree, acting like she hadn't just ripped my heart out and trampled on 37 years of love, made my vision blur with rage and grief. I sat in my car for a moment, just watching her. When had she become this person? When had the little girl who used to cry when she accidentally stepped on flowers turned into a woman who could steal from her own mother without a second thought? When had I failed her so completely that she thought love could be measured in dollars and cents? The bell above the door chimed as I walked in. Sarah looked up, and for just a moment, I saw surprise flicker across her face. Then her expression hardened into defiance, like a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar who's decided to brazen it out rather than apologize. But Mr. Chin, and I knew it had to be Mr. Chin, with his gentle eyes and careful hands, he didn't even look at her. He only looked at me, and there were tears in his eyes. Actual tears. Mrs. Davidson, he said softly, motioning for me to approach the counter. Mrs. Davidson, please. Come here. Sarah opened her mouth to say something, but Mr. Chin held up a hand. Miss, he said to her, his voice firm but not unkind, please wait over there. This concerns your mother. Now wait just a minute, Sarah started, but I couldn't hear her anymore. All my attention was focused on Mr. Chin and the ring sitting on the small velvet pad in front of him. David's ring. The ring that had lived on his finger for 37 years, that had been blessed by our pastor on our wedding day, that had caught the light every time he reached for my hand. Ma'am, Mr. Chin said, his voice barely above a whisper, when this young lady brought this ring in, she said it belonged to her deceased father. She said her mother had asked her to sell it. I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady. But when I examined it, he continued, reaching for a small magnifying glass and a tiny tool I didn't recognize, I found something unusual. Something that made me think maybe the story wasn't quite accurate. He positioned the ring under a bright light, his movements careful and deliberate. Sarah had gone quiet behind me, but I could feel her presence like a weight on my shoulders, heavy with guilt and anger and something else I couldn't name. Wedding rings, Mr. Chin explained, especially older ones, sometimes have secrets. Hidden compartments. secret engravings, places where lovers keep messages for each other. My breath caught in my throat. What do you mean? Instead of answering, he took the tiny tool and gently, carefully, twisted something on the inside of the ring. There was a soft click, barely audible, and then it opened. My husband's ring opened. I stared in disbelief as Mr. Chin carefully pried apart what I had thought was a solid gold band. Hidden inside, in a tiny compartment I never could have imagined existed, was a small piece of paper. Yellowed with age, folded so small it was barely larger than a pill, covered in handwriting I recognized instantly. David's handwriting. David's careful, precise script that I'd seen on grocery lists and birthday cards and love notes tucked into my purse for 20 years before arthritis made writing too painful for him. With trembling fingers, Mr. Chin unfolded the paper. The room had gone completely silent. Even Sarah had stopped breathing. And there, in my husband's beloved handwriting, were words that made the whole world stop spinning. If this ring ever leaves your mother's hand, tell her the person who took it has chosen gold over love. The silence that followed was complete. Total. Like the entire universe had paused to let those words settle into our hearts. I read them again. And again. And again. Each time, they hit me like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Because even in death, even from whatever place his soul had gone to wait for mine, David was still protecting me, still loving me, still finding ways to shield me from the people who would hurt me. I looked up at Mr. Chin, who was staring at the note with wonder and sadness and something that might have been reverence. Then I turned to look at Sarah, and what I saw in her face broke my heart all over again. She was crying. Actually crying, tears streaming down her cheeks as she stared at her father's final message. She looked at me, and I saw the little girl she once was lost inside the woman greed had created. For a moment, just a moment, I wanted to reach for her. I wanted to pull her into my arms and hold her the way I had when she was small and frightened and needed her mother to make the world make sense again. Because that's what she was, wasn't she? Frightened. Lost. Trying to fill some hole inside herself with money and things and whatever security she thought selling her father's ring might bring. But I couldn't. Not yet. The hurt was too deep, too fresh. The betrayal too complete. I didn't ask for the ring back, I heard myself saying, though my voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. I didn't ask why she took it. The note had already answered both. Mr. Chin carefully refolded the paper and placed it back inside the ring's secret compartment. Then he closed the ring with that same soft click and placed it gently in my palm. It felt warm, warmer than it should have after sitting on his counter. Like it still held some echo of David's love, some trace of the man who had worn it every day until death finally separated us. No charge, Mr. Chin said when I reached for my purse. Some things are priceless. Some reunions are meant to happen. I nodded, unable to speak. The weight of the ring in my hand felt like coming home. Like finding a piece of myself I'd thought was lost forever. Behind me, I heard Sarah whisper, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." But I couldn't turn around. Not yet. I couldn't face the conversation that was coming, the questions and explanations and the long, painful work of figuring out how to forgive someone who had stolen from me and lied to me and broken my heart in ways I was only beginning to understand. For the first time, I didn't feel pain. I felt peace, the kind that only truth can bring. Because that's what David's message had given me. Not just my ring back, but truth. The truth that my daughter had chosen money over love, yes, but also the truth that my husband's love was stronger than death, stronger than betrayal, stronger than any force that might try to separate us. The truth that even when I felt most alone, most forgotten, most abandoned, I wasn't. I never had been. David was still there, still watching over me, still finding ways to protect the love we'd built together. I walked out of that jewelry store with my head held high for the first time in weeks. Behind me, I heard Sarah trying to explain to her friend, heard Jessica asking confused questions that Sarah couldn't answer. But I didn't look back. I had what I'd come for. I had my ring, my husband's final message, and the unshakable knowledge that real love, doesn't end with death. It just finds new ways to prove itself. The next few days passed in a strange kind of silence. Sarah called, of course. She called and called and called, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Mom, please pick up. Mom, I need to explain. Mom, I never meant. Please, just talk to me. But I wasn't ready. I needed time to process what had happened, time to let David's message sink in, time to figure out how to be angry and heartbroken and grateful all at the same time. Because that's what I was feeling. Angry, yes. Heartbroken, absolutely. But also grateful. Grateful that David had thought ahead, had somehow known that his ring might need protecting even after he was gone. Grateful that Mr. Chin had cared enough to investigate, to call me, to reunite me with the last piece of my husband I had left. Word travels fast in small towns. By the end of the week, everyone knew what had happened. The story of the ring with the secret message, the daughter who had tried to sell her father's wedding band, the widow who had been vindicated by her husband's love from beyond the grave. People looked at Sarah differently now when they saw her at the grocery store or the bank. Not with hatred, exactly, but with disappointment. With a kind of quiet judgment that comes when someone shows you who they really are and it's uglier than you'd hoped. Her boyfriend left her. The man she'd been trying to impress with her sudden windfall, the one she'd probably planned to spend that pawn shop money on, disappeared the moment the story got out. Because men like that, men who are attracted to easy money and shallow charm, they don't stick around when things get complicated. They don't wait for explanations or second chances. Her job became uncomfortable. Not impossible, but uncomfortable. People whispered when she walked by. Colleagues who had been friendly became politely distant. Because what do you say to someone who would steal from their own grieving mother? How do you trust someone who would sell their father's wedding ring for cash? The world doesn't always punish loudly, I told David's photograph one morning as I placed his ring back in its glass box. Sometimes it just takes away applause. And it was true. Sarah wasn't arrested. She wasn't publicly shamed or driven out of town. But the respect she'd had, the reputation she'd built, the relationships she'd counted on, all of that crumbled quietly, like a house built on sand finally succumbing to the tide. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt satisfied watching karma work its slow, inevitable justice. But mostly, I just felt sad. Sad for the daughter I'd raised, the little girl who used to bring me dandelions and called them beautiful flowers. Sad for the woman she'd become, so lost and desperate that she thought stealing from her own mother was acceptable. Sad for the relationship we might have had if she'd just been honest, if she'd just asked for help instead of taking what wasn't hers. 3 weeks after the jewelry store incident, she showed up at my door. I was in the garden, tending to David's roses, when I heard her car pull into the driveway. My first instinct was to go inside, to lock the door and pretend I wasn't home. But something in the way she walked up the path, slow, hesitant, carrying herself like someone who'd been beaten down by life, made me stay where I was. "Mom," she said, and her voice was small and broken. "Mom, I know you probably don't want to see me." I didn't answer. I kept pruning the roses, my hands steady even though my heart was racing. "I lost my job," she continued. "Well, I didn't lose it exactly, but things got so uncomfortable that I had to quit. And Derek and I broke up. And everyone in town looks at me like I'm some kind of monster." Still, I said nothing. There was nothing to say. She'd made her choices. These were the consequences. "I keep thinking about Dad," she whispered, and now there were tears in her voice. "I keep thinking about how disappointed he would be. How ashamed. I used to wear his ring on my finger when I was little, do you remember? Right after the funeral, when I couldn't understand why he wasn't coming home. You let me wear it because you said it would keep him close to me." I remembered. Of course I remembered. She'd been 8 years old, devastated by the loss of the father who had been her hero, her protector, her favorite person in the whole world. The ring had been so big on her tiny finger that she'd had to curl her hand into a fist to keep it from sliding off. And now I tried to sell it, she continued, her voice breaking completely. I tried to sell the one thing that connected all of us. I tried to turn Dad's love into money, and I can't. I can't live with that, Mom. I can't live with what I've become. I set down my pruning shears and finally looked at her. Really looked at her. She'd lost weight, I realized. Her clothes hung loose on her frame, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and endless guilt. She looked like someone who'd been hollowed out from the inside, carved empty by shame and regret. "The man at the jewelry store," she said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand like she used to do when she was small. "He told me about the message. About what Dad wrote. And I realized that Dad knew. Somehow, he knew this might happen. He knew that someone might try to take his ring, and he left that message to protect you. To protect your love." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the roses David had planted 20 years ago. They were blooming beautifully this year, full and fragrant and absolutely perfect. "I chose gold over love," she whispered. "Just like Dad's message said. I chose gold over love, and I lost everything that actually mattered." And there it was. The truth that had been hiding underneath all the anger and hurt and betrayal. My daughter wasn't evil. She wasn't a monster. She was lost. She was scared and desperate and making terrible decisions because she didn't know how to cope with her father's death, didn't know how to live in a world where David's steady presence was gone forever. Because forgiveness isn't weakness, I whispered to myself, echoing words I'd said to David's photograph so many nights before. It's the final form of justice. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting after an hour of garden work. Sarah was still crying, still staring at the roses, still waiting for me to say something, anything that might begin to heal the wound she'd torn between us. "Sarah," I said finally. She looked up at me, hope and fear warring in her eyes. "Come inside," I said. "We need to talk." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. It was the first step toward understanding how love can survive even the deepest betrayal, how families can heal even from the most painful wounds. It was the start of a long conversation about grief and loss, and the terrible things people do when they're drowning in pain they don't know how to express. That evening, after Sarah had left with promises to call, promises to do better, promises to find a way to earn back the trust she'd broken, I sat in my kitchen with David's ring in my hands. The glass box sat empty on the counter beside his photograph, but for now I needed to hold the ring. I needed to feel its weight, its warmth, its solid reality. I thought about the message hidden inside, about David's incredible foresight and love. How had he known? How had he guessed that his ring might need protecting? Had he seen something in Sarah even then, some hint of the desperation that would drive her to steal from her own mother? Or had he simply loved us both so much that he wanted to prepare for every possible threat to our happiness? "Rest now, my love," I whispered to his photograph as the sun set outside our kitchen window. "Rest now, my love. Even from heaven, you still protect us." I placed the ring carefully back in its glass box, watching as the last rays of sunlight caught the gold and made it glow like it was lit from within. Tomorrow, I would water the plants David had loved. Tomorrow, I would tend his roses and fold his shirts and continue the quiet work of missing him. Tomorrow, I would answer Sarah's calls and begin the slow, careful process of rebuilding trust. But tonight, I would simply sit in our kitchen, my kitchen, and feel grateful. Grateful for 37 years of love. Grateful for a husband who had thought to protect me even in death. Grateful for a jeweler with kind eyes who had cared enough to call. Grateful for the reminder that real love doesn't end when death parts us. It just finds new ways to prove itself, new ways to reach across the impossible distance between life and whatever comes after, new ways to whisper, "You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are still loved." The ring sits in its glass box now, catching the morning light just as it always has. Sometimes I catch Sarah looking at it when she visits, which she does now every Sunday, just like before, but different somehow. Quieter, more careful, more aware of the weight of love and loss and the preciousness of what remains. She never asks to hold the ring. She never mentions selling it. She knows now what it really is, not just a piece of jewelry, not just scrap gold to be turned into cash, but a vessel for love. A container for promises made 37 years ago and kept every single day until death finally forced us apart. And sometimes, when the light hits the ring just right, when the sun streams through our kitchen window at exactly the right angle, I swear I can feel David smiling, satisfied that his final gift to me wasn't just protection, but proof. Proof that love survives everything. Proof that some promises are too strong for death to break. Proof that even when the people we love are gone, they're never really gone. They're just finding new ways to keep us safe. If you believe love leaves signs, not scars, if you believe that the deepest connections survive even death itself, if you believe that sometimes the universe conspires to protect the innocent and reveal the truth, then you understand why David's ring was never really stolen. It was just temporarily misplaced, waiting for the right moment to remind us all that love is the only thing in this world that's truly priceless. And if you've stayed with me through this long, painful, beautiful story of love and loss and redemption, then you know that some endings aren't really endings at all. They're just new beginnings, new chapters in a love story that death tried to end but couldn't. Because true love, the kind David and I shared, the kind that survives betrayal and forgives the unforgivable and finds ways to protect us even from the grave, that kind of love is forever. The ring is safe now. David is at peace. Sarah is learning to choose love over gold. And I am still here, still tending his roses, still talking to his photograph every morning, still grateful beyond words for 37 years of the kind of love that most people only dream about. Rest now, my love. Your work here is done. The ring you wore so faithfully, the message you hid so carefully, the love you gave so completely, it all served its purpose. We are protected. We are loved. We are safe.